I was a nurse in Gaza when the hospital was bombed. In the midst of the Gaza siege in the fall of 2023, Layla Mansour, a 28-year-old Palestinian nurse, works tirelessly at Al-Shifa Hospital, torn between saving lives and protecting her 6-year-old daughter, Noor, who remains in the building for lack of a safe place to leave her. What began as another shift during wartime becomes the longest night of her life when the bombings intensify and the hospital becomes a direct target. Among the patients Layla tries to save is Ahmed, an 8-year-old boy wounded by shrapnel, whose mother died in the attack that brought him to the hospital. There's also Dr. Khalil Rashid, the veteran 55-year-old surgeon who has become a father figure to Layla, and Fatima, her colleague nurse and best friend, who has worked by her side for 5 years. When the bombs begin to fall dangerously close and then directly on the hospital, Layla finds herself forced to make impossible choices: save the patients who cannot move or ensure her own daughter's safety. Among the rubble, smoke, and screams, she will discover that some decisions leave wounds that no medicine can heal, and that a mother's love can transform into both strength and torment when every second could be the last. The smell of antiseptic mixed with dust never left my hands. No matter how many times I wash them, how many creams I apply, how many times I scrub until I hurt them, I still feel the weight of those surgical gloves stuck to my skin, still hear the constant beeping of heart monitors, still see the reflection of red-orange emergency lights dancing on cracked walls. Sometimes, when I'm cooking and steam from the pot rises toward the ceiling, for an instant I think it's smoke. For a second, my heart races and I need to hold onto the kitchen sink, breathe deeply, remind myself that I'm here, that I'm safe, that Noor is at school and will come home at 3 in the afternoon like she always does. But even now, 3 years later, when the silence of our new house becomes too heavy, I still hear the echoes of that night. The sound of concrete structure cracking. The noise of metal stretchers scraping on the floor. Voices shouting names of people who never answered again. I was a nurse at Al-Shifa Hospital. It had been my life for 6 years, since I graduated, and swore I would dedicate every day to saving lives. I never imagined that one day I would have to choose which lives to save. Gaza has always been a place where you learn early that life is fragile. I grew up watching my father fix what bombs broke, my mother stretch every grain of rice to make it last longer. When Noor was born 6 years ago, I swore she would grow up differently. That I would work enough, save enough, do enough so she would never know the taste of fear. The hospital was my refuge. Between those walls, I had control. I could clean wounds, administer medications, hold the hands of frightened children until they fell asleep. I could make a difference. Dr. Khalil always said I had blessed hands. Layla, he would say, adjusting his reading glasses while examining a patient, you have the gift of calming people. They trust you before they even know you. He was like a father to me, especially after I lost my parents in an airstrike 2 years before. His gray hair and calm voice were anchors on difficult days. Fatima worked the night shift with me. We had been friends since college, and she had known Noor since she was a baby. Aunt Fatima, Noor called her, and Fatima always kept a candy in her coat pocket for her. It was Fatima who stayed with Noor when I needed to work double shifts. It was she who made her laugh when the bombings got too close and I saw fear in my daughter's eyes. Noor slept in a small room at the back of the hospital. I had transformed that space into her little corner. A single bed, some toys, drawings taped to the wall. It wasn't ideal, but with the constant attacks, it was the safest place I knew. The hospital had generators, medical supplies, and I would always be nearby. She drew a lot. She had notebooks full of colorful drawings, houses with enormous gardens, smiling families, blue skies without a cloud. When the war ends, Mama, she would tell me, showing a drawing of the two of us on a beach, we'll live in a pink house by the sea. I kept every drawing, promised that yes, when everything was over, we would find our pink house. The night of October 15th began like any other. The night shift was always quieter, despite the distant bombings that seemed like constant thunder on the horizon. I had put Noor to bed at 9, read her a story about a princess who saved dragons instead of being saved by them. She laughed at the part where the princess teaches the dragon to make cookies. Mama, she said, pulling at my coat sleeve when I was already leaving the room, will you be here when I wake up? I always am, I replied, kissing her forehead. Sleep well, Habibti. The hospital was at maximum capacity. The bombings of recent days had brought a flood of wounded burns, fractures, shrapnel. Dr. Khalil had been operating for 18 hours straight. Fatima and I split post-operative care with 2 other night shift nurses. Ahmed arrived around 10:30. 8 years old, dark hair stuck to his sweaty forehead, enormous brown eyes that seemed to take up half his small face. Shrapnel in his right arm and thigh. His mother had died in the attack that hit the building where they lived. He didn't speak, just looked at me with an expression I knew all too well, the look of someone who had lost everything in an instant. "Hi Habibti," I said, using the same sweet voice I used with Noor. "I'm Layla. I'm going to take care of you, okay?" He nodded slightly. When I began cleaning the wounds, he didn't cry, didn't move. He just kept looking at me with those eyes that seemed too old for that face. "Do you have siblings?" I asked, trying to distract him while applying local anesthesia. He shook his head. "I have a daughter your age. She loves to draw. Do you like to draw?" This time, a small positive nod. I spent the next hour caring for Ahmed and 6 other patients. A 50-year-old man with burns on his chest, a pregnant woman who had gone into labor during a bombing, a 15-year-old girl with a broken arm. Fatima was upstairs, caring for ICU patients. Around 2 in the morning, I was applying to an elderly woman's arm when I heard the first nearby explosion. It wasn't like the others. This one came with a vibration I felt in my bones, that made the window glass tremble and the lights flicker. "That was close," Dr. Khalil murmured, appearing beside me. He looked exhausted, with blood stains on his coat and crooked glasses. The second explosion came 5 minutes later. This time, some windows cracked. Patients began moving restlessly, and Ahmed, who had finally fallen asleep, woke up startled. "Sure," I said, placing my hand on his shoulder. "It's okay. You're safe here." But I was lying. We both knew it. The third explosion made the lights go out completely. The generators kicked in a few seconds later, but those seconds of total darkness were enough for panic to spread through the hospital like fire. That's when I heard Noor crying. I left Ahmed with a nursing assistant and ran to the back of the hospital. Noor was sitting on the bed, hugging the teddy bear I had given her for her birthday. "Mama, I'm scared," she said, extending her little arms to me. I picked her up, felt her heart beating fast against my chest. "I'm here, Habibti. Mama is here. The noises are very loud." "I know. But we're safe in here." Line number 2 of the night. Fatima appeared in the doorway, breathless. "Layla, I need you upstairs. More wounded have arrived." I looked at Noor, then at Fatima. My daughter held tighter to my neck. "Bring her," Fatima said. "It'll be safer if she stays close to you." I picked up Noor and we went up to the second floor. What I saw there made my stomach turn. 6 people had just arrived in an ambulance, an entire family hit by an attack. The mother, unconscious, with head injuries. The father, trying not to scream in pain with a clearly broken leg. 3 children, the youngest no more than 2 years old. "Mama," Noor whispered in my ear, "why are they hurt?" "They're going to be okay," I said, not knowing if it was true. "We're going to help them." I put Noor in a chair in the corner of the room, asked an assistant to keep an eye on her, and dove into work. For the next 2 hours, everything was mechanical, cleaning wounds, applying bandages, administering medications, checking vital signs. I tried not to think about the bombings that seemed to be getting closer and closer. It was at Fort Wentty in the morning that everything changed. The explosion was different from all the others. It didn't come from far away, it wasn't just a sound. It was as if the entire world shook. The floor swayed under my feet, the walls cracked, and for a moment that seemed like eternity, everything went silent. Then, chaos. Pieces of the ceiling began to fall. The lights went out and came back, went out and came back. Someone screamed they hit the hospital, and I felt my blood freeze. Noor. I looked at the corner where I had left her, but the chair was empty. The assistant who was supposed to be watching her was on the floor, with a cut on her forehead, trying to get up. "Where is my daughter?" I screamed, running to her. She ran away when the first explosion happened," the assistant said, touching her forehead with her hand. I tried to hold her, but my world collapsed. "Noor." I screamed, my voice lost in the chaos. "Noor." Dr. Khalil appeared beside me, held my arm. "Layla, we need to evacuate the patients. The building could collapse. My daughter is lost somewhere in this hospital." "I'll look for her," he said, with that calm voice that always reassured me. You help evacuate those who can be moved. She'll be fine. But I knew he was just trying to calm me down. None of us knew if the building would withstand another explosion. The next few minutes were a blur. Fatima and I began moving patients who could walk to the stairs. Those who couldn't. Dr. Khalil made the most difficult decision of his life. You take those who can be transported. I'll stay here with the others. Doctor, no. Layla, he interrupted, taking off his glasses and cleaning the lenses with trembling hands. I'm 65 years old. You have your whole lives ahead of you. Take whoever you can and get out of here. That's when Ahmed appeared beside me, pulling at my sleeve. He had managed to get down from the stretcher alone, was limping, but standing. Aunt, he said, the first word I heard him speak, I saw a little girl downstairs crying. My heart almost stopped. Where? In the place where I was sleeping. I left Ahmed with Fatima and ran downstairs. The first floor was partially destroyed. Half the ceiling had collapsed, and there was debris everywhere. The room where Ahmed had been hospitalized was covered in dust and chunks of concrete. Noor. I screamed again. I heard quiet crying coming from under a table that had been hit by pieces of the ceiling. I ran there and saw her, curled up under the table, hugging her teddy bear, covered in white dust but apparently unharmed. Mama! She cried when she saw me. I picked her up, held her so tight I probably hurt her, kissed her face, her hands, her hair full of dust. Are you okay, Habibti? Are you hurt? She shook her head, still crying. I hid like you taught me. I had taught her to hide under tables during bombings. I never thought she would need to use that lesson inside a hospital. When we got upstairs, the situation had worsened. More of the ceiling had collapsed, blocking one of the stairways. Dr. Khalil was trying to keep 2 critical patients stable with equipment that barely worked. Layla. Fatima screamed. We need to leave now. I looked at Dr. Khalil, then at the patients who couldn't be moved. One was a young man, maybe my age, who had arrived with severe internal injuries. The other was an elderly woman, connected to a ventilator. Ahmed was beside Fatima, holding her hand. Doctor, I said, come with us. He shook his head. I can't leave them. Noor began to cough. The smoke was getting thicker. Mama, she whispered, I can't breathe right. It was at that moment that I had to make the most difficult choice of my life. I looked at Dr. Khalil, who had been like a father to me. I looked at the patients I had sworn to care for. I looked at Ahmed, who had lost everything and trusted me to keep him safe. And I looked at Noor, my daughter, my life, coughing in my arms. Doctor, I said, my voice broken, I need to get my daughter out of here. He nodded, with tears in his eyes. I understand, Habibti. Go. Come with us. Please. Someone needs to stay with them until the end. I kissed Dr. Khalil's forehead, held his hand for one last second, and ran to the stairs with Noor in my arms. Fatima was waiting for me with Ahmed. The 4 of us went down together, through the debris, the smoke, the smell of gas and dust. When we got outside, the hospital was on fire. Sirens were wailing in the distance, but I knew they would arrive too late. We sat on the sidewalk across the street, Noor in my lap, Ahmed leaning against my shoulder, Fatima holding his hand. We stayed there, watching the building where I had worked for 6 years, where I had saved hundreds of lives, where Dr. Khalil had dedicated his entire life, slowly collapsing. Mama, Noor said, her voice small and tired, will Dr. Khalil be okay? I couldn't answer. I just held her tighter and cried silently. Ahmed pulled at my sleeve. Aunt, he said, thank you for saving me. You're the one who saved me, I replied. If you hadn't told me where Noor was. He nodded and leaned his head on my shoulder again. At 6 in the morning, the hospital had completely collapsed. The firefighters managed to retrieve some bodies, but Dr. Khalil was not among the survivors. 2 days later, we got transport to leave Gaza. An international organization was evacuating families, and Ahmed had no one left, so he came with us.
Now we live in a small town, far from the war.
Noor goes to school and still draws her pink houses. Ahmed is in the same class as her, and they've become inseparable. He still doesn't talk much, but he draws too. His drawings are different from Noor's darker, with fewer colors, but gradually I see small details that give me hope.
À Trier, à Beurre d'Air.
I work at a small clinic now. It's not the same as the hospital, but I can still care for people, still make a difference. But sometimes, when I'm suturing a cut or giving a vaccination, I think about Dr. Khalil.
I wonder if he made the right choice that night.
If I should have stayed, tried to convince him to leave, tried to save more people. Fatima tells me I saved who I could save. That a mother has the right to choose her child first. That Dr. Khalil made his own choice, and that he would be proud to know that Ahmed, Noor, and I are okay. Maybe she's right. Maybe all the choices that night were the only ones possible. But there are still nights when I wake up with the smell of antiseptic and dust on my hands, still hear the beeping of heart monitors, still see Dr. Khalil cleaning his glasses with trembling hands before making the decision to stay. And there are still mornings when Noor wakes me up with a new drawing, this time, a pink house with a garden big enough for 3 children to play. Her, Ahmed, and a little girl with gray hair who she says is Dr. Khalil's granddaughter that he never got to meet, but who now lives in heaven with him. In those moments, I know we made the choices that allowed us to keep living. And that living, especially after a war, is also a way of honoring those who stayed behind. The smell of antiseptic is still on my hands. But now when I look at them, I also see Noor's small hands holding mine, and Ahmed's even smaller hands learning to trust again. And that perhaps is healing enough to continue.